All right, so this is our episode on OCD, Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder. I said that right.
Well, as you said obsessive, I got anxious like you didn't know where it was going.
Well, tune into the ADHD episode and you understand the background
It's
on
like, oh
that.
no, is he going to stick this landing?
Panic.
Obsessive.
Compulsive disorder. So with this episode, I think we'll talk a lot about like the what is OCD, what the experience might look like, and then go into detail about how to navigate such a wild sort of diagnosis that's still even debated in terms of neurodivergence. Like it's really a gray area. But when I think about OCD, I think about awareness. With OCD, you can be some of the people that have more awareness than the people around you. And that leads to inevitably more responsibility for the people around you and what's around you. You feel more dysregulated than the person next to you because you're thinking 7 steps ahead about what could go wrong in some area. And it's because your working memory is more sticky. You can pay attention to more things. And the prerequisite for anger is for something to get in the way of something that you're aware of, which is why with OCD, you can be much more angry, much more readily. And people tend to think that you're a little bit too uptight and care about too many things. But what they don't understand is that you have very unique neurochemistry. And part of working through OCD is stuff that I'm not going to jump into that just yet. But so I think with OCD, just to start off with this whole thing, you have a lot of awareness. That leads to a lot of responsibility. And it makes sense that you get frustrated because you're carrying so much in your head. And a lot of people don't get you.
I agree, and it's funny that you jump. You always just we jump into like the 5th layer before we get to through the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd and 4th. But you're right. I think it is an awareness thing and a sense of responsibility. That's like chapter 17. But it's a good point. And the uptight thing, I think, is like kind of a mischaracterization of people with OCD. I do think that uptight can be a better characterization of OCPD, obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. Like I think Monica from Friends is a good representation of what OCPD might look like. You know, kind of like the vacuuming her vacuum with the tinier vacuum to get the dust off her bigger vacuum. That actually is a scene. But OCD is actually, I think, well depicted in a bunch of random TV shows. Like I'll always have to casually mention Girls. Hannah from Girls has displayed OCD type behaviors, but the best one, I think, is, and the most kind of classic OCD is Michael J. Fox in Scrubs. He plays this doctor. He's like a visiting doctor for the Scrubs hospital, and he just did a surgery, and it's like 2 hours after the surgery, and he's still, you know, after you do your surgery, you kind of have to wash your hands like pretty rigorously before you can leave for the day. And JD walks in and he sees his character Michael J. Fox like still washing his hands after 2 hours, and you could tell he's incredibly frustrated because he can't just end the experience. And I think this kind of gets at a really big part of OCD for a lot of people, which is there's this palpable feeling of rightness. Like if I'm going to turn the gas stove off, or if I'm going to check the gas stove before I go to sleep tonight, or if I'm going to close my front door and lock it, the lock has to make a particular sound, or it has to feel a certain way. And to me, that's reassuring, and that kind of regulates me and conditions me to say I can walk away. But if it doesn't click correctly, if you feel like there's something still to be done, you could be locking a door for 2 hours.
Yeah. And I think this ties into another really misunderstood part of OCD, but you fight the hardest out of anybody for certainty and awareness, but you get the most pleasure from letting go of responsibilities. And that's why you do so many rituals with OCD. You are trying to, you've learned at some point at both a genetic and environmental level that control means safety. So you're not fighting for control. You're not controlling as somebody with OCD. You're fighting for letting go of control. You would love it if you didn't have to hold on to so many responsibilities. And that's why I think a lot of people with OCD find so much pleasure by surrounding themselves with people that are more go with the flow. They surround themselves with people like with ADHD. I find a whole lot too. but you want to you know that pleasure exists in the absence of control, and yet you shackle yourself to awareness and having to control lots of variables because that's the only way in which you've seen the world safe. You focus on rituals and all that because in states or in moments where there's things that you want to change but you don't have any power over to change it in a moment, you'll engage in some ritual that makes you feel like you can have some sort of agency. The sound of a click or the sound of tracing your steps or the sound of or writing lots of notes, like it's not so that you can make sure that you don't forget something. It's more so that you can feel like you're doing something to relieve that stress.
But it's the key word is the feeling. Like there's this unique feeling of correctness that if I don't achieve with whatever task I'm doing, it's just going to be this unresolved, gross feeling. And a lot of times, like I've always, I don't think I've really had really OCD in any way, but I think it's a spectrum. And sometimes what's attractive about compulsions is they do have this regulating effect. It's not worth the squeeze because over time, the compulsion you did that made you feel better hits less. It's kind of like a drug. Like the first time you did it, you're like, oh, I slept like a baby. I felt super safe after I locked the door for the first time. But then it never hits as good. And so you're constantly chasing this feeling of safety that you never really attain, but you're still hitting the same button that you think will help you attain it. And so I think it's funny, we're talking about the C part, but if we're going in like a temporal sequence, you wouldn't really need a C without the obsession. And I think the way I kind of help clients think about obsession and what's the function an obsession plays for you. Imagine you're afraid of snakes. I use this example with clients. Imagine you're afraid of snakes and the garbage can over there. I'm an awful therapist. I put a garden snake in there. It's not dangerous, but it's in there. And I trained it to stay in there, but who knows if it will. You're going to try having a session with me, and every millisecond, one of your eyes is going to be creeping over, looking at that, because you start to obsess and fixate on this thing that you think might be dangerous. And I think in a lot of ways, obsessive thoughts are very much like snakes in a garbage. You don't know how dangerous they could be, but they feel dangerous, and you're definitely not going to take your eyes off it while they're still in the room.
Yeah, and a huge part of dealing with OCD is dealing with the obsessions. And one mistake that most people with OCD make is trying to challenge the obsessions through traditional CBT. Like you can't undo your intrusive thoughts by trying to challenge the thoughts, because challenging the thoughts becomes a compulsion in and of itself. A lot of people will have the thought, oh my gosh, I have to do this. And then they'll try to challenge it, like, well, maybe I don't have to. Maybe I don't have to. But the more you feed yourself that thought with OCD, because it's hard for you to, like you have intrusive thoughts that can't be just shaken out of your working memory, like people who are more neurotypical or however you want to describe it. So challenging the thoughts are just going to feed into the birth of the compulsion in and of itself. Like you get this relief of like, well, I'm challenging the thoughts. Now I'm making an effort. I'm controlling again. So the only way to work through healing obsessive thoughts and intrusive thoughts with OCD is going straight to exposure. You have to literally close your eyes to the possibility of you taking action to solve the issue. You have to also just go as far as you can into the intrusive thought. Well, yeah, so what? Maybe my hands are dirty and I want to wash them 20 times. You know what? Let me dig my hands in mud, But what if I don't wash my hands? Maybe I'll get this disease. Yeah, maybe you will. And that's just part of life. Like you don't try to challenge a thought and say, oh yeah, maybe if you, well, think about it this way. Like maybe you won't get the disease because you washed your hands twice so far. Like, no, you don't want to do that. You want to go straight into, yeah, it's likely that you could die today. It's possible.
And I think that's why, like, oftentimes with OCD and obsessive clients, I often say like, I lost my train of thought.
With clients with obsessive thoughts.
Oh, I totally lost my train of thought. It's so funny. But yeah,
It's a good
yes.
exposure for OCD. Like, yeah, we don't need to have our thoughts.
You don't have to have your thoughts. Oh no. I think you're giving thoughts too much power. Like it's not about challenging them. It's about putting them in the appropriate place in your life. To me, thoughts really don't mean anything by themselves. They might serve like a function, but they don't mean anything. But I think someone with obsession tendencies, they become so fixated on getting away from the way they feel that it just kind of reinforces the way they feel. You're manufacturing danger by running out of a building that isn't on fire simply because it feels like it could be. I've completely lost my train of thought.
No worries, but I like what you're saying though. Like, how do you navigate OCD? And I think something that's important is dealing with the control piece. Like with OCD, you feel like you can't move forward unless there's an objective. So I think people with OCD feel like I need an objective before I know, or I need to have the groundwork. I need to know the why behind this, right? And that's because with OCD, it's such an awareness diagnosis. You have to kind of be aware of things, and that's when you feel safe. So of course you don't feel safe if you don't have an objective when you're going up and doing karaoke. Like you need to have, I need to be, am I trying to be a professional singer? Is that why we're singing? like with OCD, you have a hard time just allowing yourself to be in a state of play because you need an objective. You have to read the rule book of the game all the way from the first page to the last before you can jump in. And it sends a feeling of cortisol down your body if somebody is saying, well, let's just make up our rules as we go. You're like, no, we have to, and you're trying to hold that thought back, but you're trying to interact with people that don't have OCD and they're just going with the flow and you don't feel comfortable. So to work through OCD, you have to realize that you have a task management team in your brain that only operates based on objectives, while also realizing that you can't enjoy life that way. You have to turn off the task management and you have to be in the present moment and you have to use energy without objectives. Learn to take action without having an objective and trusting that some external force will give you the guide as you go along. Trust that some external force will pull you in the right direction, because you're only living half a life if you have to know the start to the finish all the time. You won't have fun in an escape room if you know the exit already. You have to go in without knowing.
Well, that's the part of it that's a self-imposed prison. I feel like OCD, above other disorders, there is an element where our minds are holding us emotionally hostage. It's not so much that this moment is unbearable. It's more so that if you don't resolve this thing that doesn't feel resolved, if you don't fix this feeling, if you don't get rid of this anxiety in this moment through a compulsion, then, oh boy, it's going to be really awful for you 10 minutes from now, 20 minutes from now. If you don't go check the door to make sure it's really locked, you're going to be up at 2 a.m. wondering, you might as well go check it now. It's a very enticing thing. And I feel like, it's funny because I remember I was like, I was fascinated by this because I got a little bit of this for a moment years ago where I was like, I just keep like wondering if the door's locked. And I remember my therapist at the time, he was like, why don't you record yourself locking the door? So I did that. And then the thought popped up when I was in bed. I was like, did I lock the door? And I'm like, I have a fucking recording of it. So it just kind of illustrates the disparity between reality and a manufactured thing in your mind. But this also kind of illustrates something interesting, which is, there's this phrase in mentalization called psychic equivalence. And I'm not going to explain it in that context, but the way it relates to OCD is, I feel like in OCD, the more you think about something, the realer it gets. So obviously up until this point, I think we're talking more about more likely contamination OCD, like keeping your hands clean. I'm literally watching The Aviator, which is like a movie about Howard Hughes, who had OCD. He had contamination OCD. But we're talking about contamination OCD. But if you switch it to relationship OCD, all of a sudden, if you have this thought of like, oh, I think my partner's cheating on me, but there's no basis for it, there's no evidence, but maybe you lingered on a TikTok for too long, and now you're getting cheating TikToks, and now you start thinking about it more. Now you're thinking about it more and more and more. All of a sudden, it starts to feel much realer than the first thought you had, and nothing has changed except the frequency of thought you've had.
That's so interesting. Yeah, if nothing's changed but the frequency of it, so then you wonder, like, why is this changing? But literally, if you do something a million times, it's going to change your psyche in that direction.
Yes, the more you think about it, the realer it becomes. And then on top of that, I feel like people with OCD, they have a really good imagination. So they're not like, there's a depiction of OCD and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where they ask like the mom, they're like, why are you switching the lights 3 times every time you leave the room? And she was like, she's talking about her son. She's like, oh, so Charlie doesn't die. Which may or may not be perfectly accurate, but it hits the point of like the ways in which your mind is going to hold you emotionally hostage is it's going to be nuanced and it's going to be really believable. I'm not worried that my partner's going to cheat on me because of I forgot to do the dishes. I'm worried that if I forget to do the dishes, then they're going to start to become frustrated with me, and then I'm going to be frustrated with them, and it's like it gets very real, and then the realness of it becomes very powerful.
Yeah, you live in the future and you're thinking about obstacles and down the line, and you could be talking about something and then your face is just sinking, thinking about the possibilities of where it could go. When it's like, wait, hold on. We're in the present moment. Nothing has happened yet. You haven't signed your life away to this future thing that's happening. And I think part of the problem with OCD is that if with ADHD, your ability to sit in chaos is just very dispersed, and you're just kind of not needing any objectives to sort of exist. Like that's the natural experience of ADHD. With OCD, it's very much so I need to have a perfectly set, fine-tuned avenue of energy that is directed, and then I go. So with every obstacle in life, it's like, what's the problem? What's the solution? What's the problem? What's the solution? There's no sitting in something as if without that context. There's point A to point B. So in every aspect of your life is point A, aiming, and then point B, shooting. And I think that's also the reason why OCD, there's so much anger in it. You're constantly using this fine-tuned level of energy pointed in some direction. So of course, when you think about a fear, your mind goes a million miles in that direction of what it would look like if that fear played out. You're thinking 7 steps ahead of reality. And then, of course, the people around you don't get to even aid or support. And that leads to a cyclical maladaptive pattern where now you have this reinforced belief that I need to plan everything out. I need to aim, focus, and shoot because everybody else around me is not operating at that same speed. So with OCD, you have to learn how to take a step back and realize that the spectrum doesn't have to be from point A to point B. You can exist sort of in a state of what you perceive to be chaos and realize that it's actually not a place of chaos, but maybe more safe than you think.
And I think what you're also getting at is like, that's why OCD can be so exhausting too. Like your mind is kind of carrot and sticking you to peace, but you never actually reach peace. There's always this like promise of, well, if you do this thing, you will feel good, and it's so short term. Like with OCD, I mean, the reason OCD is such a powerful disorder is because in the moment you're distressed, it's very convincing that to fix this distress, you just have to do this thing. And if you were to zoom out and look at the longer term, it's like by doing that thing, you're conditioning yourself into a prison that you'll never be able to escape. But in the moment, it's this carrot and stick game your mind's playing with your head, and the carrot is peace. And so you keep pursuing it, eventually hoping to get it, but every step you take in that direction is actually a step away from peace.
Yeah. And you invite other people into that same prison. You invite other people there because now that same self-critic in you is also the same critic, that the same standards you hold other people to. Like if you're someone with OCD, you think so far ahead about how to accomplish something, and you are also the people that are the most aware when it comes to all the problems that are existing around you and how to solve them. So you think about other people. You feel responsible for them. You look out for them and you make sure that you don't get in their way as they're doing things. And so when you see somebody else operate with very thoughtlessly, or in your opinion, very thoughtlessly, you assume that they're doing it because they are intentionally trying to get in your way, and you feel frustrated and angry. So that's why you experience so much anger with OCD. And then when other people are they're not actually willfully trying to hurt you. They just aren't as aware as you. They're in a state of, their brain waves are more in the theta area, and yours is more in like gamma.
Nice.
And you're just like, I was talking to a client about that. And you're like so focused on things that you could think, well, if I'm this focused, then by my own, and it's very likely that other people are just as aware as I am. And so if somebody is aware, that means that they also are responsible, and you hold people to the same standard that you hold yourself. And that's just not reality. Mm-hmm. So with OCD, you have to ask yourself, is this person willfully not taking care of things because they just don't care about me? Or are they actually just not as aware as I am? And a lot more often than not, they're actually just less aware and you don't realize it. And if you realize that, you'll be less angry at somebody with OCD.
I think that's an interesting point about like anger. I never really thought of that element of it, but you're right. And this is a mistake a lot of people make, which is they're like, I think like this, so why wouldn't you think like this? Mm-hmm. And I think also I think like I think all anxiety disorders in some way are our mind's way of trying to solve for a real problem, the problem of uncertainty. So OCD tries to solve for it by finding absolute certainty, but and in some ways, and this is I think really the genesis of the disorder. In some ways, finding control in certain aspects of your life does yield a positive outcome. Mm-hmm. It's just there is an inflection point of control where to gain any more would actually be to lose some, paradoxically. And I think especially just to pivot to relationship OCD, I think people with relationship OCD can often come across as really controlling, when in reality they're just feeling constantly out of control and trying to regain something. But the problem with relationships is you're not the only person in them. And so as if you had individual OCD that's not tied to another person, you could maybe your obsessions are mostly affecting you. But when you have relationship OCD, it's very hard for you not to see the other person as causing your distress when they're just living their life in a normal way.
Yeah. Yes. Relationship OCD is, you can go so far in the direction of control in any way. And I like to think about like anxious avoidant dynamics with that. Like if with relationship OCD, I'm convinced a lot of people with that are very anxiously attached. Mm-hmm. And you can still be avoidant too, but when you are really concerned about relationships and connection, that implies that you want external sources of support rather than internal. And so with anxious attachment, it's all about external sources of support. And so like I imagine that most people with relationship OCD are anxiously attached. And what it looks like to have OCD and anxious attachment is you don't want to have a whole lot of, you want to make sure you have a lot of eggs in different baskets. You want to build up control by making sure that, well, if this relationship doesn't work out, maybe I'll have that one. And if I am interested in you, I better be sure that you're interested in me, right? Like building control in relationships with anxious attachment, you start to look like the most open sort of person when it comes to who you're connected with, because you are so desperate to not lose connection. And it's not simply because you are just a fiend for like connection. It's also because you just don't want to be abandoned. Mm-hmm. So if you have OCD and anxious attachment, sometimes you can look like the people who are the most afraid of abandonment in the world. Not just because you want connection, but because you don't want to open up the possibility of losing it because of your control with OCD.
I'm glad you labeled it as such, because I feel like there are different types of relationship OCD, and one of the common ones is abandonment. That's the obsession. The obsession is I'm going to be abandoned, and the compulsions are any ways in which you try and limit that, which will probably exacerbate the possibility. Mm-hmm. But so that's one. But then another type of relationship OCD, another common type of relationship OCD is the obsession of you're constantly debating, like, is this person I'm with right for me? You know, and so every single exchange and interaction is a possibility of triggering this anxiety of like, I'm not sure I'm with the right person. And I feel like one of the biggest ways to help navigate that is to zoom out of these individual moments and just ask yourself a simple question. What is it like generally when I'm hanging out with them? Like not afterwards, because afterwards your mind's gonna go crazy in analysis mode. But when you're actually spending time with them, is it nice? Do you enjoy it? Because ultimately, that is the sum total of your actual relationship. Everything that you do afterwards when you're by yourself is a manufactured problem. And because it's a manufactured problem, it requires no solution.
Yeah, it's supposed to be something that is natural. And so like with OCD, the things that are supposed to be the most natural are the hardest things for you. And when it comes to relationships, of course you have this deep anxiety because you're feeling like I need to maximize positive outcomes and I need to make sure that I maximize my ability to avoid pain. So if you're in objective mode, the moment that you're pursuing someone while dating, you are going to the point where you're not enjoying the nature that it's supposed to be. Dating is supposed to feel like the same feeling you get when you're enjoying a nice meal and things are feeling really slow. It shouldn't be this huge, like high stakes sort of objective. It is a bit higher stakes than eating, but so when you're trying to date someone and you have relationship OCD, you really have to pull back and realize that it's not this heavy objective that you have to solve. If you're trying to date someone and you're interested in them, you have to let it be, and you can't control all those aspects. You are pursuing people out of your pain instinct a lot of times when you're avoiding abandonment. And so in that niche sort of experience, it's really important that you try to find a way to make it more natural without thinking. And so the only way to enjoy something to its fullest is to do it while turning off your awareness. The times where we're in flow state and having the most fun are the times when we're thinking the least. And with OCD, you're always the person that's thinking the most. So of course, whenever you're trying to date someone, it's really hard for you to relax and just turn your brain off. But that's the place where you go into rest and digest. You're in a state of fight or flight or extreme energy and passion to make sure you maximize positive outcomes. And if you're constantly in that state, everything that's supposed to be natural won't be. And then let's say the relationship works out. Well, then you secure the relationship and now you're convinced that the only reason this relationship exists is because I worked so hard and I turned it into an objective. If you never turn off your brain and allow yourself to just be in a relationship, then you'll always have fears of abandonment because you'll think if I'm not on my game, this all could fall apart.
That's so well said. And the phrase pursuing people out of your pain instinct is just like such a nicely stated way to say it.
Thanks.
But you're right. And what the solution you're giving is kind of like, okay, so there's one drive motivation, the pursuit out of your pain instinct. There's got to be another one.
Yep.
Maybe maybe just ask the question, is there another part of me that has its own drive and it's not a drive running away from something, but it's running towards something?
Yeah, the pleasure instinct, right? Like how do you experience just joy and happiness when you're pursuing things that are important to you where it doesn't feel so high stakes maybe? And that's the solution with relationship OCD and all that.
So you mentioned relationship, you mentioned like abandonment. So these are like different obsessions.
Yeah.
Abandonments, there's the obsession of, is this person right for me? But I think there's a third obsession, which is pretty common in relationship OCD, which is especially early on when you meet someone you really like, I'm going to fuck this up. I'm going to self-sabotage it. And I think that for a lot of people, it kind of mimics a different type of OCD, which is this like harm OCD. Some people are afraid to be around sharp objects, not because they are wanting to harm anybody, but they're afraid they might harm someone or harm themselves. And I think the same applies to relationships in the sense of like, I'm going to meet someone I like and I'm going to screw it up. And I think oftentimes that doesn't actually happen, but the anxiety that comes from that can really turn people away from really good romantic partners.
Certainly. And I think that's part of the reason why with OCD it's good to ask yourself, like, how do you uniquely pursue control? Because it can look like the contamination. It can look like oh, wait, did I do my research to pick the best person so that I don't miss out? Does it look like securing several different relationships so that you can make sure that you have something to fall back on? Like, does it look like constantly working on myself to make myself better and all that stuff? And I think with OCD, it's really important to ask yourself, what is my core belief about control that's worthy of testing it, not testing it out, but challenging? But to go even further into what you're saying, like I think with OCD, it's all about this hard work and effort. And a lot of people with OCD, I think that's part of the reason why lots of the rituals can look like, I don't know, skin picking, making sure that there's nothing on you that's imperfection, working out or doing a whole lot of things, because it's all about how can I fine tune something to gain control, you know, and that is across the board what's happening. You're trying to use effort to maintain something, and you don't really ever get to enjoy much because you're constantly looking. There's this yelling inner critic that's constantly trying to whip you into shape.
It's like this feedback loop of like self-monitoring. You know, it's there's like this this clip from Bo Burnham's special where he's like making fun of commentators on YouTube, and he's like he starts commentating on the video he's doing in that moment, and then he starts commentating on the commentating video, and it's just like this endless loop of commentary. And I think like the level of self-monitoring, I mean, I think particularly OCD has a level of self-monitoring that is unduly put on the shoulders of someone with OCD. So like I'm going to be constantly vigilant towards the ways in which something can go wrong, and that's going to make me feel safe. But it's the fact that you are creating an environment of self-monitoring also makes you feel very unsafe.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of person feels safe? Someone who's not scanning everywhere all the time.
And I think this goes back to the different instincts, right? Like if you're trying to find a surefire way to heal relationship OCD, I would say you need to learn how to no longer brace for negative impact. If something's flying towards you and you feel like it'll be bad, you're going to tense every bit of your body, control, in order to make it so that it doesn't physically hurt your body as much, because it's going to hit you, but at least your body was prepared for it. But what if the thing that was flying towards you was something good and you had your eyes closed the whole time? You would be so busy tensing that you would miss the opportunity to grab it. You have to challenge the belief that the best way to optimize something is by preparing for the worst, and shift it over to preparing for the best. You need to open yourself up to smiling, opening your eyes, and leaning forward at the risk of the bad objects slapping you in the face, but also at the opportunity of being able to grab this thing that's really good. So in a sense, it's like allowing reality to hit you in the face and allowing that to be a misconception proven wrong over time, that maybe reality won't hit you in the face sometimes. Maybe your eyes being wide open and not bracing for pain will actually allow you to grab the best thing life can give you. You've spent so long trying to control things by bracing for negative impact that you think that's the only way to live. But maybe this might sound almost like saying like lemons can taste sweet, but it's true. You just haven't experienced it.
That's really well said. I think that's a good way to end it, honestly. I know we just have like a minute left, but I feel like that's a good way to end it.
I think so too.
That was really well said.
Thanks. A lot of good stuff here.
Please subscribe to our Patreon and let us know what you want us to talk about next in the comments.
That was cool.
Yeah, nice. Nice ending to it.
That was really good.